Prove it.
This story is about an experience I had using a Ouija board when I was in the 7th grade. I'm now 28 years old, so it was quite a while ago. I don't remember some of the smaller details anymore, but everything I'm writing actually happened, and this story is 100% true. I'm the kind of person who would probably never have believed in anything paranormal unless I experienced it myself. So in a way, I'm glad that this happened to me when it did, as it opened my eyes when I was still young. This all took place at my friend Mark's house. On the weekend, me and 3 of my friends had been hanging out at Mark's house all afternoon. Mark's parents were going out all night, and they had a rule that no friends were allowed over when they weren't there. So we were all getting ready to leave. Mark's parents were both doctors and insanely strict. He used to get grounded for weeks at a time for the most ridiculous reasons. Needless to say, we were all pretty surprised when his mom came upstairs and told us that we could all sleep over that night as long as we were good. In those days, having a house free of parents was a huge deal, and we were all really excited. Before I go on, let me explain the layout of the house really quick. It's in a nice neighborhood. Mark's house had a garage in the front, and there was a walkway along the side of the house that led to the front door, which was in the center of the house. When you walked in their house, there was a small guest bedroom to your left and a garage at the far end. To your right, there's a large open family room. Upstairs basically consisted of 2 bedrooms in the far right end of the house and a master bedroom right above the garage. So back to the story. After his parents left, a few of us ran home real quick to get a few things. We all lived pretty close, and I could skateboard from home in about 5 minutes. When everyone returned back to Mark's house, one of my friends had brought a Ouija board. We were all really eager to try it. We went upstairs to the game room to set it up. Mark locked up the house and turned off all the lights downstairs. When everything was all set up, the house was pitch dark, except for the ceiling fan light we had on so we could see what we were doing. I can't remember the specific questions we asked or the responses we got, but I do remember 2 brief interactions. By the time we were all into it, the questions were more provocative. I remember immediately feeling weird and I was getting nervous. The responses weren't the kind typical 7th graders could come up with, even if they were controlling it. The responses were getting more menacing and everyone was getting scared. You could see it in their faces, but nobody wanted to show it. Then my friend Brad, who had been asking most of the questions, screams out, "Prove it, do something." Then there was a few seconds of pure silence. Just as I was starting to feel relief from nothing happening, there was a gut-wrenching shriek from the cat downstairs, directly below us, followed immediately by the sound of shattering glass on the floor. I can't explain the fear I had at that moment. The next thing I remember was we were in the back of the game room. All you could see outside the room past the walkway was the top half of the stairway leading upstairs. We watched those stairs for what seemed like 30 minutes without saying a single word, hoping that no one would come up those stairs. At some point, we decided we had to go check out what happened. We all grabbed whatever makeshift weapons we could find and slowly made our way downstairs as a group. When we got around the corner of the staircase, the first thing I saw was the cat. It was still hissing, back arched, and scared to death. It was on top of a cabinet, about 10 feet from the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs was a giant puddle of water and shattered glass. It was one of those snow globes, the ones that are about the size of a small watermelon and are about 10 to 15 pounds. As soon as we all realized what happened, it hit everyone that this very large heavy snow globe had been on the cabinet far from where the cat was standing, which was 10 feet away from where it was smashed on the ground by itself. Before this could even sink in, music started playing in the kitchen behind us. At this point, we were all terrified. We ran into the kitchen and turned on the lights, and in the middle of the kitchen was one of those Santa Claus toys that shuffles around and sings a song when you turn it on. Mark runs up and grabs it, and he started flickering the power switch, but it did not turn off. It wouldn't turn off. He quickly hits it again and again against the counter, and when it still wouldn't turn off, he then threw it as hard as he could on the ground. When the toy broke, the battery cover flew off, and what I saw next with my own eyes haunts me to this very day. The toy had no batteries. The next thing I know is we were all upstairs in Mark's room. The door was locked, and we were all praying. Nothing else happened after that, but needless to say, Mark was grounded when his parents got home because of the mess that was caused that night. I'm glad I experienced this, but there is no way I would ever use a Ouija board again in my entire life.
The entities on the roof.
12 years ago, when I was 20, I had been married for 2 years and had 2 kids. I was a stay-at-home mom, and my husband worked as a landscaper. We lived in a double-wide trailer. One night, I was at home alone because the kids were visiting their grandparents, and I decided to relax and watch a movie. Our home was about a mile away from the nearest neighbor's house. It rested atop a large hill that was surrounded by dense forest. I had barely started the movie when I heard what sounded like a kitten meowing outside. I got up and decided to investigate. I went outside and immediately noticed something wasn't right. The meowing sounded like it was coming from about 20 feet up in a large oak tree. When I walked over and stood directly underneath the branches, the meowing turned into a deep growling, not like a dog, but someone pretending to be a dog. It was too dark out to see anything clearly. I was beginning to get scared, and that's when I decided to go back inside and lock the door. While I contemplated whether or not I would be overreacting by calling the police, that's when I heard a loud boom on my roof, followed by the most insane, high-pitched scream I had ever heard. I covered my eyes and ran to the bedroom and grabbed the shotgun. I was shaking with fear because I knew something or someone was trying to scare me, and this whole ordeal wasn't normal. You could just feel that it was something different. I called my husband at work, and just as he answered, the noises started again, only deeper and longer. He told me to hang up and call the police, but I knew they wouldn't be out there for at least another hour or two. So instead, I decided to stand facing the window with the shotgun. After a few moments, what looked like a dark shadow-like entity jumped down in front of the window facing me. It had complete red glowing eyes. After staring at me for a few seconds, it then growled. I was in disbelief at what I was looking at, and just then I heard another sound on top of the roof, and just like the first one, another dark entity jumped down off the roof, staring right at me. It was standing right next to the first entity. Instinctively, I cocked back the hammer on the shotgun. I didn't want to shoot through the window if I could help it, but I wasn't going to let them get into my house. It looked like they pressed their faces to the window, and all I could think about was how silent it was, and all of a sudden how pulling the trigger would break the silence. I'm not sure how long we locked eyes, but I suddenly noticed a pair of headlights coming up the driveway. I recognized my husband's car. I wanted to scream out for him not to get out of the car, but before I could even open my mouth, both black entities jumped back onto the roof and into the darkness. My husband never caught a glimpse of them, and ultimately didn't believe me, but his mother did and confided in me that she had seen them before. She believed that they were some kind of demon-like entity. Over the next few years, before we moved away, I would occasionally hear meowing from the trees and around my house at night, but I would never go out to investigate, not after what happened the last time. I'm not sure what they were, but paranormal or not, I don't ever want to find out what they wanted from me.
True, scary, paranormal story number 2. The Woman in White.
When I was 7, we lived in a very old and completely empty house without furniture or even bathrooms. If you had to go to the restroom, you needed to leave the house, and you'd had to go outside and use the outhouse. An outhouse was a restroom that was outside, and they used to make those back in the day.
This outhouse had a very heavy rusty door that never wanted to open easily. One night I was sleeping upstairs, but I heard something in the kitchen beneath me. Assuming it was my parents, I went downstairs thinking they might share a snack with me, but to my surprise, there was no one there and nobody had passed me to go back upstairs. Since I was already downstairs, I decided to go outside to the bathroom. For some reason, I wasn't afraid, given the circumstances. I opened the squeaky door and did my business, and shoved the heavy door back open again, intending to head back to bed. I looked up at the house and noticed, through the window on the ground floor, a woman in white. And when the outhouse door slammed shut behind me, she turned and made eye contact with me. I stood dead frozen, staring dumbfounded back at her. Suddenly, terrified that I had no idea who this woman was, I closed my eyes and waited for a moment, and when I opened my eyes again, she was gone. I sprinted back into the house, the long way, just to avoid the room that she had been standing in. I ran upstairs and huddled terrified in my room until I fell asleep again. I never told anyone what I saw. Now fast forward to when I was 10 years old and living in another house. I shared a bedroom with my 2 brothers, and my sister slept in the room across the hall. I woke up around 2 o'clock in the morning because I heard the sound of footsteps across the hall, walking over to the glass panel door on my sister's side. I saw a small girl who I assumed to be my sister. She was dressed in all white and pressing herself against the panel from inside my sister's room, and she was staring right back at me. I opened my door and asked her if everything was all right, but being able to see her much clearly now, that there was only one panel of glass between us, I realized with a sinking feeling in my stomach that it definitely wasn't my sister. The girl didn't answer as she stared back at me with eyes that seemed entirely too wide and dark. I slammed my door shut and leapt back into my bed. It took me hours before I fell back to sleep. I didn't tell anyone about what I saw. The last incident was last year. When I was 17 years old, I was playing football for my high school at the time. I was sleeping in my own room and was awoken by a muttering sound from outside my door. I thought it was my mother, but what really disturbed me was that the voice was chanting something extremely rapid in another language that definitely wasn't English, and my mother doesn't speak any other languages other than English. Part of me really wanted to get back up and open the door, but I felt a chill. Then the voice completely stopped and I found myself unable to move. I don't know how long I was paralyzed, but it was not until the sun began to rise that I felt I was able to move again on my own. I have no idea if it's the same entity that's been haunting me. If anyone knows or has any suggestions, please let me know.
The Horned Creature.
Hi, I was born in 1983. Every summer I would visit my aunt's farm in South Wales. I was out in the countryside that had many acres of land with fields, forests, and streams. When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I had already spent a couple of summers there, and I knew the land quite well. I would spend 4 to 6 weeks there at a time. Because I was comfortable around the grounds, I never felt worried about exploring on my own. I would be hanging around the hay bales in the barn, or riding my mountain bike around the fields, or just generally looking around to see what I could find. But one day, it was musky and foggy outside, and also eerily silent. I was in the grassy fields next to the farmhouse. I wasn't doing anything exciting. To be honest, I can't even remember what I was doing there. Suddenly, I started hearing my name being called as clear as day. Michael, Michael, Mike. I looked around and I couldn't see anyone. Another nephew of my aunt, whose name was Nick, also lived on the farm. He's older than me, and he would always enjoy playing tricks on me whenever he got the chance. I thought it was him. I heard the voice calling out to me again. It was actually said in a manner that didn't sound panicked or menacing, but just trying to get my attention. I looked around and noticed, off in the distance, there was a horse stall, and I could see a person inside of it calling to me and waving their arms above their head, as you would expect when someone is trying to get your attention. Nick, what are you doing in there? I shouted as I started to walk towards the stall. I thought it must have been him, but from where I was standing, it didn't really look like him. It was really weird because whoever it was appeared to have horns on top of their head that curved backwards. I was quite far though, so I thought that Nick might have had a stupid hat on or something. I continued to walk closer, and as I did, the figure in the stalls seemed to fade. When I got there to the stall, it was completely empty. There was only one way a person could have gotten out, and that was directly in front of me. Not only that the horse stall was in the middle of a large field and there was nowhere they could hide, but someone had definitely been there calling out to me and waving. They had a pair of horns on their head, and I definitely saw them fading as I approached. I ran straight back to the farmhouse and found Nick and my aunt and uncle sitting at the kitchen table. I asked Nick if he had been outside calling to me, and he laughed and said, "I've been here for hours, mate." Both my aunt and uncle confirmed this. To this day, I have no explanation as to who or what that thing in the horse stall was, but it's a memory I'll never, ever forget.